Good morning, everybody. Overnight, there were 14,300 tests taken by New South Wales residents. We do want to see that number maintain and go up. Dr Chant and I and the Minister remain concerned about undetected cases in southwestern Sydney. Overnight, we had 8 cases in New South Wales. 7 of them were in hotel quarantine, and just the one was linked to an existing cluster in Lakemba. So the positive news is the one person who was identified as a new case overnight lived in the same household as an existing case, was already in isolation. But notwithstanding that, we do remain concerned about cases that are undetected in southwestern Sydney. We're urging in particular people to come forward in that area. As you may have already been advised, the sewage testing also detected antibodies of the virus, and so we are concerned about what that might occur, especially given we are entering the season where festivities and social gatherings increase. We want to make sure we get on top of this before we get into a season where people are more mobile and obviously in closer contact with each other. I also want to please ask everybody not to be complacent. Yes, we are on top of the virus. Yes, we are in a good position, but we have to remain ever vigilant, and it's really difficult not to let your guard down, because it's easy to think that we're immune and the case numbers are low, but we can't have that attitude. The virus is as contagious as ever, it's as dangerous as ever, and if it remains undetected in the community, you can really have surges of new strains, which is the last thing we want, heading into a period where we want people to be able to relax with their family and friends and enjoy themselves in a COVID-safe way, but that won't happen if all of us let our guard down. So I'm please urging everybody to really maintain their vigilance. Please keep coming forward and getting tested. And in particular today, I also want to call out to businesses. There is no reason why any business across the state should not have an electronic QR code or a QR code which can be accessed through mobile phones. I was recently 2 days in regional New South Wales, and most of the places I went to in regional New South Wales and very remote communities had the QR code. So if businesses, very small businesses in regional New South Wales can use the QR code, it takes about 5 minutes to sign on to the Service New South Wales one. We really need businesses to do that, because we need to build resilience ahead of the Christmas season. We need to build resilience in our businesses. I can confirm that the information I received from Service New South Wales this morning said that we've had about 1 million people tap on through the Service New South Wales QR code, which is fantastic, or 1 million taps. And if your business has its own QR code, that's great. If you don't have a QR code at all, please use the Service New South Wales one. It literally takes 5 minutes to sign up. And unless we build that resilience in our businesses, we are worried about any surge in cases over the next few months, which is the last thing we want to see. So we've asked the relevant agencies to come back with some proposals to really incentivise and encourage businesses to take it up. And if not enough businesses take it up, we'll have to look at other means to ensure that we maintain that resilience within our system. Finally, I just wanted to make comment on borders. A lot's been discussed in the last few days. I welcome the decision of the Tasmanian government to allow New South Wales residents into Tasmania in the near future. I thank the existing state and territories that have already got those arrangements. And I say to Queensland, I appreciate you making an announcement on the eve of the election. I hope it's a positive announcement, because residents in your state, in Queensland, New South Wales and across the nation are suffering as a consequence. And I also urge the West Australian Premier to do likewise, because there is no reason why New South Wales residents shouldn't be welcome into other states. I've been saying that for a long time, and I maintain that position. And it has been, for myself and our agencies in New South Wales, an acute sense of frustration that a vast number of state premiers have chosen to lump New South Wales and Victoria in the same category over the course of the last few months. Now, that is an incorrect assumption, and I'm disappointed that occurred. And I would ask those state premiers to acknowledge what is occurring in New South Wales, the situation we're in, and how vastly different that is from Victoria. In relation to the Victorian border, we're obviously monitoring that situation very closely. We're maintaining our status quo position at this stage. The Victorian government is still in the process of easing their restrictions. They're not yet at a position where those restrictions are eased. And what would be a sensible approach for us is to see what happens to the virus once those restrictions are eased. And of course, we don't want to run the risk of any seeding from Victoria whilst we still are concerned about existing cases that may be lurking throughout Western Sydney. And what is important to note is, unlike New South Wales, the other states don't have the quarantine measures in place. We're still welcoming back 3,000 Australians every month. About up to 45% of them aren't New South Wales residents. And now we're seeing, as the infection rate increases in other nations, that we are seeing a number of more cases in quarantine. And whilst we know they're isolated and safe, there's always a risk with that. And we'll always call on other states to do their fair share of increasing the number of Australians they're receiving, so that New South Wales doesn't have to carry the load for the whole nation, which is essentially what we're doing at the moment. So it's one thing to have your borders up, but another thing to take your own fair share of residents coming back to Australia, and I urge the other state premiers to consider those positions.